The 2000 Maelström and the 2009 Polytechnique are two French-language films directed by Denis Villeneuve.
Bonjour, my name is Denis Villeneuve.
At the earliest stage of his career, today we take a deep dive into these thought-provoking and visually gripping films to explore how they have laid the foundations for Denis' later success.
Beings?
I know you were pretty excited to get into Villeneuve's stuff.
Not as excited as you because I believe that he's one of your favorite directors.
He is, but I remember when we were talking about doing this, you're like, oh, I can't wait to get into it. I'm like, really? Already? Shit. Like,
yeah. Well, he doesn't have a really large filmography at this stage, but I think we are very excited to discuss these movies today.
Yeah, because I haven't watched any of his earlier stuff until now, and even we were talking about it before, how hard it is to find these earlier movies because they're not wide releases, they're not big Hollywood successes, they're both all filmed in like Canada, French Canada, so it's all French as well, so it's not even in English. So it was tough to find. We're both struggling to try and figure out how to watch even the earlier movies than this, which was Cosmo and
the 32nd of August. Yeah. I think we definitely need to have a separate episode where we discuss those two movies.
When we get a chance to watch them. Or find them even.
And I find it so interesting because nowadays, like, I think the rise of international movies are getting a bit more and more prominent.
And this even with a really successful director as well. That's what I thought it wouldn't be as tough to find them.
Yeah.
Because usually when there's a big director, it's like, oh, everyone's like, oh, where are the films? And like get them kind of catalogued and sorted somewhere. Or even on streaming services, like, oh, we've got to put Villeneuve's movie on because Dune 2's big or whatever, right? Yeah. But it wasn't like, I think that's what we were saying, like Maelström, who we're going to talk about, was the easiest out of both of these. And even, I know Polytechnique's a bit of a tougher subject to like maybe stream, but it was earlier.
No,
or later, sorry. It was later, so it shouldn't be
later,
as tough to find, but apparently not.
I was surprised when I was searching for these movies as well because Maelström was very widely put on different platforms.
For us, it was easier to find compared to Polytechnique, which was a bit more obscure.
Yeah. Okay, so out of the two movies, do you have a favorite?
I'd probably say Maelström, just because it's its own kind of story and like quite captivating on its own right. But Polytechnique, I think it does kind of do justice to what it's trying to cover. It is tough. Like, we talk about it now, but like more maybe in America, it's a bit more of a topic that they talk about every week. But someone doing like a shooting on this kind of level. So it was a tough thing to kind of watch and like take in. But I think it did a very good job of kind of portraying like in the moment and kind of how it affects the people involved.
Let's jump into the first movie. So the year 2000 Maelström. I did a bit of research on the word itself. So right off the bat.
So was I. I was like, what the hell does Maelström mean?
Okay. So do you want to share what you're finding is?
Well, I didn't look that hard, but the first thing I found is like, it's like a whirlpool or like a rough river. So, and I was like, that's kind of perfect for this movie. Kind of describes it very well.
Yes. And did you also find out about the word origin as well? So I'm sure that
Norwegian?
It's a Norwegian word. But it's actually relates to a location that I will butcher the name right now. It's Maestrom, which is a very dangerous channel in the northwest coast of Norway.
Okay, yeah.
So it's got the name from there, and I think it's a perfect encapsulation of the movie because some of the characters are from Norwegian origins.
Yeah,
and just like you said, it means a whirlpool of water. And
also the narrator in the film is a fish, a half-dead fish.
It's one of the most searched questions about this movie. Actually, people were wondering, okay, why is the story being narrated by a dying fish?
Yes.
Why being butchered by a fishmonger?
And at the start, he describes it as like, oh, my final words, I'll tell you this story or something. Like, he's revealing this story, which is kind of a strange way to look at it. Because when I was thinking about it, I'm like, spoiler alert, we're going to jump into the movie anyway. So the guy that dies is a fishmonger, and there's a lot of fish stuff in the film. So it's like, I don't know if it's a hint at like, maybe it had something to do with the fishmonger, but also at the end of the film, they throw the ashes into the water. So it's like, don't know if it's like through that essence, but even then it feels like a different world almost. The butcher that's butchering these fish is in like an upside down boat, just butchering these fish. It doesn't seem like for much reason, because if you look, even the fish itself, they look pretty battered and scarred, like they don't look in any condition to be eaten. So it's like, I don't know if it's like more of a metaphor for the story he's telling more than actually having a direct line to the story.
In one of the interviews, they mentioned that the fishmonger is dressed up as executioner as well.
Yeah.
So, and I think the images of fish and water are like the underlining theme of the movie. And the images of the fish are scattered throughout the film as well.
Yeah.
So it has some sort of metaphoric messages in there. So do you want to go through the synopsis of the movie first? In case you guys haven't seen this movie, it came out in the year 2000.
Yeah, it's literally about a woman. Its life's kind of spiraling out of control, and then she drunkenly hits a guy and hit and run, drives off. He ends up dying, and then she has a bit of guilt for the moment and goes to see him essentially, and then runs into his son, and then kind of like falls in love with each other in the next couple of days, and then shit kind of goes weird from there. But it's a very strange story.
Yeah, I wouldn't recommend watching this movie for Valentine's Day.
No,
but it's one of Villeneuve's earlier movie. But I guess you can kind of see quite a lot of his well-known tropes and imageries and direction style throughout this movie. So we have already discussed the fact that the movie is being narrated by a dying fish. In your interpretation, why do you think he chose the dying fish as the narrator?
Because it's telling the story as it's about to die. So it's like revealing, it's like almost guilt or like unburdening itself before it dies about this story. So it's kind of like, it is kind of like a horrible story. So like this fish on its like dying breath is like unburdening itself of this story. So it's like almost her guilt and her like, as she goes through this film and to the point she gets to of like her talent, like wanting to get off her chest through the film. We have multiple moments a couple of moments where she's like, oh, what do I do with this? Like she knows she's done it and no one else knows she's done it. So she doesn't know how to deal with it. And she's already dealing with a lot of her own personal issues before she ultimately kills this dude. So it's like hard to explain to her, like, is she the fish? Does the fish know like what happened? Is like it's like however you want to kind of go into it, because there's a lot there to be kind of like looked at to. But for me, I don't know if it's like the fish is like a part of her like guilt, or even like being an accomplice in it, or like even just knowing what happened. So it's like even like I said before, it's like depends how much you kind of want to look into it, or even just like an interesting narrator to be like telling this strange story from like a dying fish about to die. So I don't know. I feel like there's so many ways you could take it.
Yeah,
Darren.
and the genre of the movie is an absurdist movie as well. So it has a little bit of flair similar to Yorgos kind of movies where you have a weird
maybe not to
imageries.
like his max level, but like there's a little bit of it there.
Yeah, my interpretation of the dying fish is because the image of the fish is scattered throughout the movie. So for my understanding, the fish is a representation of her being out of her comfort zone, like fish out of water.
Yeah,
you know, and throughout the movie, she encounters that images quite a few times, and it's right at the pivotal moments of her life as well. So my interpretation is the fish is just a representation of her discomfort and her situation being spiraling out of control, just like the title of the movie, Maelstrom. So the Maelstrom is the closer you get to the center, the stronger the current
it's gonna
is.
get. Yeah, exactly.
So, but before we get into the actual movie, so I want to discuss the accolades of the movie a little bit. This movie was Canada's submission for the Academy Award for Best International Movie in the year 2001. But unfortunately, it didn't get any nominations. But it got quite a few accolades. The biggest awards were the Genie Awards. I'm not sure if you heard of this. It's basically the Canadian
awards?
The Canadian Academy Awards.
Okay.
The equivalent. So he won it for Best Actress. Best Supporting Actor got a nomination, and this Genie award was giving out almost every year from 1980 to 2012. But now they combine it into Canadian Screen Awards.
Okay.
Yeah. This is a very interesting movie. So if we want to focus on the main character, Bibian, right at the start, she's in a very pivotal moment. She had an abortion.
Yeah, it's a tough pretty much once the start, I'm like, okay, you're like it.
It's already started.
The fish wasn't brutal enough. It's like, okay, now we know what we're kind of like getting into already.
And this shot in the beginning was one of my favorite shots of the movie as well. So it's got the combination of a lot of good things. So when we switch from the operation light from close up to a bit further out, it causes us a bit of disorientation. Okay, like where are we? And the shots of the abortion happening in the tube, in the clear plastic tubes. The texture of the substance inside the tube is a bit horrifying. It's combined with the sounds of being sucked out, and it's a combination of colors, red on top of cool color palettes. So it's a very jarring image, and it gives you a very strong impression of where the direction of the story is going to go.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So this is one of my favorite shots, and from just that shot, you can see a lot of similar images that Villeneuve will end up using in his later movies. A lot of close-ups on the characters' faces, a lot of silence with a lot of color contrast.
He lets the scene do a lot of the talking.
Yeah.
Because like it already sets up kind of like what this character's already going through, and it's like already a tough situation before we know anything else about her. Because I do think the main focus early of this film, even maybe more than early, is kind of like on her suffering. Like every part of her life is literally like failing.
Yes.
And then we get to the main point later in the film of when she drunkenly hits a dude. And that's also because of her past pain. She like goes out and like she's drinking and using, and then just like gets the pinnacle of like her driving home drunk and high on something. So it's like, it's just like more failure on failure. Because that's what's crazy. Because like we go from the like abortion scene, I think she goes to her friends to like for comfort, which makes sense. It's like it's a hard thing to go through. They're like making pasta. I like that scene where they're like cooking and making pasta together, kind of like discussing things. And then she's like, "Oh, have you heard of this? Was it not German? Was it a Norwegian like poet?" And she like recites the line of, I did write it down. It was like, "All human actions are manifestations against death." And I'm like, oh, God. Like, even that, again, it was like another brutal thing to be like, oh, God. Like, you kind of know where the film's going to go or being prepared for what this film's dealing with, which is a lot of hardship for her going forward.
What I found out as well is, like, you are right, like, the movies is a very good representation of visual storytelling. But if you... well, I mean, like if you guys understand French, then I'm sure you get a bit more out of the dialogue.
Yeah, then we probably would.
but then the dialogues has a lot of contradictions. This is what I read on one of the analysis on the movie. So when they were talking about the poet, and they were talking about the abortion and things like that, they were talking about the surgeon that helped her with the abortion. The abortionist has a lot of kids.
Yeah.
And the poet that this person is basically idolized, he committed suicide, even though he wrote about life.
Yeah.
So it's a lot of contradictions. And her friend, who is supposed to give out good advice, she had 3 abortions prior.
Yeah. Well, I don't think it takes away from the moment. Like, I think it's important because I think the point of more the quote is like, you're going to deal with a bit of death in life and how you move through it. Not like how much you want to get into the idea of like abortions and how you feel about them. But she felt like this is the right decision for her. And her like being able to like make this decision and like try to live with it and get through a lot of the guilt early in the film. Yeah. Like it doesn't matter if the doctor's had a lot of kids. It's not about where he stands about it. Yeah. It's about what she thinks is best for her life and whether or not her friend's giving her advice from probably more of a standpoint of like she's dealt with it as well. Like this is not things they want to deal with, but they kind of have to like keep living their life the way they want, or at least escape something. Because as we see her character, she's in no position to be a mother. Even if she wanted to be, she's in not a good position to do that. So it makes sense for her to be making this decision as we even out of the first 10 minutes of this scene. So I don't find it like contradictive. I find it like introspective from her not even just her character, but the people around her just being like, you know, trying to help her and help her through it. But she's more destructive to herself than anybody else is. And I don't think it takes away from advice. I think you can learn from lessons if you made those mistakes, right? Like you can understand if someone's had an abortion, like telling someone what help you need and people will be around. Because she's there through the whole film, trying to be there for her because she thinks she's still struggling from the abortion, even though she's struggling with just about everything else. So I don't find that contradiction maybe as strong as maybe others would, because I don't think that's the point. I don't think it's trying to kind of like attack her characters or even the characters in the film for making this decision, because I think it's more about her struggle and pain through it and her trying to deal with it, because that's pretty much the whole film, most of the film, until we kind of get up to like, I don't even know if you want to call it like romance scene, but like, you know, even that's tough when I'm like, oh my God, why is she doing this?
Yeah. In the context of the movie, I completely agree with you. I think in that sense, you know, like we're supposed to empathize with the character. But what I'm saying is, in this case, because Denis wrote the script for this movie, I think he wanted to use the contradictions of images in the dialogues to represent the competing forces within the character, because from the start of the movie until the end, the main driving force of the character is just the battle between guilt and doing the right thing and things like that. So I think the dialogues, it serves a bit more than just representing the story and what the character is going through. It also sets the tone for the
what
main
she's
conflict.
going through.
Yeah,
because even they sing a song a bit later. It's like after dinner, and she's like singing like a song, and then I think it cuts back to the fish, and then they're like, oh, she doesn't realize what that song actually means or whatever. That there's a lot more to it rather than being like a gentle song or something, I think he said. So even that, even without like delving into their conversations or the quote, the fish literally tells you straight out, you know, this story isn't going to get any easier.
Yeah. So from that pivotal moment, we follow her journey, like a way of coping with the tragic event. And another favorite shot of mine is when she's in the nightclub, and it's a lot of flashing lights and of her. Like you can tell that she's spiraling out of control and she started to abuse the substances. What do you think about her journey leading to the accident? Before she went to the club, she also went to see her younger brother.
Her brother, for about who they work with. But even before that, I think from the abortion, I like the scene when she's driving down the street and she drives through the fish. And the fishermen are trying to put the fish back, but people just keep driving through it, and then she makes the decision also to drive through it. So I think that's even like another thing to like look into about like her continuing to drive through the fish. But yeah, like before like the party scene, she runs into her brother, and he's talking about like what's been going on with this account. And like, oh, have you talked to the accountant? She's like, oh, why don't you call them up and ask them? And he's like, oh, actually, I've got them on the line. And then when he talks to them, she hasn't communicated with them for like 3 months or something. And he's like, yeah, just you're out. Like you're not going to be a part of the business. We're not going to worry about the money you've lost. Just you're done. And that was like another thing apart from you know, dealing with the abortion, you know, the day before or whatever. Now going into her position at work or whatever. I assume because later on, we kind of found out she like looks over some of the businesses. I think it was like the clothing businesses. But yeah, it was a rough scene. I'm like, holy shit! This like at this point, I'm even like, oh my gosh. Yeah. And then when she goes out, I'm like, it kind of makes sense. She's kind of like spiraling, and she's just looking for a way out. Essentially, that's why she's like, you know, drinking and smoking or doing whatever she was doing at the party.
Yeah.
Because she even didn't want to be disturbed. Because I remember a guy went to like touch her or whatever, and she's like, no, just leave me alone. She doesn't.
But then she ended up hooking up with someone.
That's a bit later down the line, but at this moment, she's still kind of like a bit out of it and still like dealing with parts of her life. Because then she goes to leave and her friend is like there. Is like, oh, what'd she say? Oh, like, oh, just come back to mine. She's like, oh, I'll go park my car out the front or something. And then she drove. I'm like, why is she driving? Like, we didn't see how much she drunk, but I feel like she's clearly like
intoxicated.
Should not be driving.
Like shouldn't be driving. Yeah.
And then obviously it's raining and stuff as well, which doesn't make it any easier. And then she hits this fishmonger. And even this bit I liked because like after that kind of happens, it cuts to the fishmonger's part of the story, or even his story up to being hit, which I really enjoyed because it was like viewing things through different perspectives and how it affects the other people, and even just going to the fishmonger and like seeing how he lives his life and how things go, and then him leaving and going home for work in the rain, and then he gets hit, and then I was like, oh shit, he got up. Like he gets up and goes home, and maybe it wasn't too bad. And then I think it was the last scene before he sits down, and you can see there's a massive bloody hole in the back of his head, and like, oh shit.
Yeah. So like, did you notice these images in Villeneuve's later movies, because this is one of the things that it seems like he's still exploring the way that he tells the story, not the non-linear way of storytelling. So, and you will see this repeated in the later movie, but this way, like you're telling the same event, but from two different perspectives.
Yeah.
What I like about this sequence as well is just it's very sudden as well. Usually for an accident, you have the build up, people walking over, and then you have the music and things like that.
I do like the collision was like the beginning of his story, essentially, right? And even like, if we get into it a little bit, there's a lot of imagery of the water early in the film, which is hinting at her being on the boat at the end. But that's what I like. Like, when I was watching this, it reminded me a bit of like a Christopher Nolan movie almost. Not to like the extent of like sometimes he goes to with his kind of like outside of like, timelines or how things are kind of like running in line. This isn't that bad, but it kind of runs in that similar way. When I was like, it kind of reminds me a bit of that. Even though at this point, I'm like, both of them weren't really super well known. But I found it very interesting. Very interesting how he used different perspectives of characters to kind of tell her story.
Yeah. Yeah, and I like the fact that basically after the accident, her struggle basically takes on like moves onto a higher gear.
Yeah.
Like
she was
really struggling before.
You thought it was rough. And then this, like her killing a dude in the car. And then her freaking out about that because she like looks at it, goes back to and sleeps and wake up and probably like it all kind of realized that she goes down to a car again. And then she like finds a bit of his head in the wheel and she's like, oh God. And like it did happen. It's kind of those things you wake up and like, oh fuck, hope it was a dream, it didn't happen. But she's like, oh shit.
And there are a lot of sequences where she tried to take a lot of long showers, trying to scrub her away from the guilt and things like that as well, which I like. And in retrospect, it seems like all the other events, like the being fired or being compared to her famous parent when she did a photo shoot.
It's like an interview later on, a bit later, even after she's killed this guy. I think it even comes after. It's like the next day or the day after. Because I remember she's like, I don't want to go to work.
Yeah.
And then they're like, they're here to like do your interview. And she's like, oh, okay. Because that's when you find out, like she comes from like a prominent family about like her father's like this big dude or whatever. And I do like that it doesn't lean into it too much. It kind of just gives it to you a little bit. You're like, oh shit. Because they go into this whole like mythology kind of thing about her being like kind of lying about how well she's doing to hold up the myth of who she is, even though that's completely false. Because they used, I can't remember the word, but it was like myth. I can't remember how it was pronounced. Even if I spelt it right, I don't know if I would be able to say it. But I was like, oh my God, this is like brutal. The dreams was later. Mythomaniac, I think it was written as, or I was trying to figure it out. But yeah, the idea of being the myth and just lying about it and holding up this myth of trying to like follow along your parents or even your father's image. Because it was like, even at this point, you're like, that's long gone. Whether or not she's like still a prominent part of doing any of what was in her father or family was involved in, which is kind of crazy to see. So
do you think that the details about her backstory and families add up to her struggle?
I think it just adds like more complexity. Like it's rough for anybody to deal with this, but then it's like she seems to be like somewhat of a prominent figure and it's just like, oh shit, she's like even worse because she's still trying to hold up the lie in her head, even though we've seen like multiple points. There's a point where she goes to get gas and asks the guy about like how much gas it would take to light herself on fire. And it's just like, she's clearly like done. She's like at the end of her ropes. So and it's funny that even she's in this trying to do this interview and she's still kind of like trying to keep up this myth of who she's meant to be. So it's kind of like, that's an interesting part. That's why I found it weird, kind of like where the story went later, because I'm like, oh, this is kind of a bit of a turn when we get after she like figures out who the dude was she killed, and like, oh God, she still has the guilt. Like, oh, I want to go see, I want to go like kind of, I guess, pay her respects, or if it makes her feel less guilty. Yeah,
but before she went to the funeral, she found out about his situation through a newspaper.
That's how she like kind of put it all together. It's like, oh, a guy found dead in his room, and then it like cuts back. Does it cut back to the fishmonger? Because it goes back to the fishmonger. No, that's what I like. They're eating in a cafe.
And they're eating octopus.
They're eating octopus, and she says octopus is too tough. and she needs to take it back.
Yeah.
And then it like splits into a different story where it goes to the waiter, and the waiter's like, oh, talks to the chef. Chef's like, oh. I don't know what language it would have been, Chinese, Vietnamese. And then
They're talking Vietnamese.
and they're like,
okay,
this isn't my fault. And then he calls up the fishmonger. He's like, who the hell gave us this octopus? And then he's like, oh, who did it? And it's like, oh, this guy did. And like, oh, where is he? He hasn't been here in a couple of days. And then they go to his house and find him dead. So I found that interesting. That was another perspective that we see. Them complaining about the octopus leads into them finding the body, which leads to her realizing what she's done, and he's actually dead. Like, she didn't have confirmation before, even though she already probably thought he killed it. She killed him. But this is like it. He's like, oh god, he is dead.
But after she found out, and I like this kind of sequence as well, and Danny spoke about this during the interviews for the movies, is when she had the choice to either getting rid of the car or committed suicide.
Yes.
Because, after she found out, she got a bit of hair stuck into her car. The car got a few dents, and she was like, okay,
there's enough here. Yeah.
I have done it, and I might go to jail. This might damage my images of the famous daughter. But it's also, she was having this struggle, like, should I go to the police and just turn myself in, or should I get rid of this car?
Well, she literally has that conversation with the dude when she's on the train.
That dude is so random. Like,
it's funny. I liked it because he's in it twice, but she's like talking to him. She's like, oh, they have like she's like asking for the time, and then she's like, hey, just like, by the way, I've killed somebody and no one else knows. What should I do? And he's like, what do you mean? Like, why does it matter? It's like, who cares? Like, if no one knows, it doesn't matter. Just forget about it and move on. Like, it's not hurting anyone anymore. And it's like, he asks asks like follow-ups and stuff. He's like, yeah, don't worry about it. I'm not going to tell anyone. Just live your life. And I think that's a part of it. Is like, oh, maybe I should just try to keep going, which I found funny because obviously later on she wants to find where the guy's dead and like kind of pay respects or even have some kind of closure from it, and then runs into his son, and I'm like, what the fuck are you doing?
Yeah, I want to talk about the sequence where she tries to get rid of the car. Because she tried to do that before, and in the interview, Denis said that this is like a turning point for her, and she wanted to let fate decide. So she, in the beginning, she wanted to push the car, but then the car got stuck, and then she's like, okay, I need to drive the car into the water now, but if I do that, there's a chance that I might die, which might not be the bad thing considering my situation. So I really like the underlying conflicts of that particular sequence. And obviously we later found out that she survived,
because I think that was a cutting point, because I think that's when it cut to a separate story after she like drives into the water, because it doesn't give you a clear answer if she lived or not. Until she gets out.
But then after it cut to a diver going down to the water, right? So what is that about? Like,
that was the sun.
Yes, but I'm still a bit unclear, like what he was doing.
That was just his job, I assume.
But
he was just diving into a dam. I don't know if they're looking for cracks or just things into the dam. But I assume that's what they were doing. But that's what, like, jumping to perspectives. We jump to the sun, and then how he's going to find out about his dad's died. Then he goes, what happened? Like, they cremated him. They don't want him to cremate. And they're like, and then he like goes there and gets his body. And they even go through the whole spiel. And then when he like goes out, and then you see her, and I think that's when you figure out like she's not dead. Because she's there, like, at the desk asking for his father. What was his name? I didn't even write down his name.
Anis Kremon or something.
Kremon. And she was saying his last name wrong, and it was with a C, and it's a K or something. And that's how they kind of run into each other, which is kind of cool as well. And then it, like, cuts back to her after that little, like, interaction. It cuts back to her side of things and how it went after she, like, gets out of the water. So it's, like, very interesting way of, like, telling this story.
Definitely not a meet-cute.
No, how'd you meet? I was trying to find your dead dad that I killed.
What do you think about the romance that they develop in the third act of the movie?
Because that's what I felt. I felt it was very late into the film. I'm like, what's going on here? Because I think it's trying to even bring more tragedy to a story, right? Like, I feel like her going so far out of her way to find him, to like get rid of her guilt, or I don't know, just find something that she feel like she needs to like move on. But then running into her son, and then she's like, oh, like, come have a coffee with me for my dad. He's even like, how'd you know my dad? And she's like, oh, it's like his neighbor or whatever. And she's like, oh, I'm going to go now. And she's like, oh, no, just have a coffee with me. They have a coffee. And then he's like, "I'll stay a bit longer." No. And he's like, "I've got to go to the apartment and like grab stuff." And he's like, "Oh, I'll help you." And then they go to the fishmonger and then they drink with the fishmonger. And then all the fishmongers are like, they have a swig and they're like, "I hope they die in a horrible way. Whoever killed your dad." And then it's like, "I hope you get their guts ripped out." I'm like, she's there just drinking along with it. I'm like, oh my God.
And when it gets to him, he said that if I find him, I will kill him.
Yeah.
So I think that's like the nail to the coffin. And I like the fact that up until this point, she is still convinced that she needs to lie to him.
Yeah.
You know, like, well, for obvious reasons. Like, well, she's
at
scared.
This point, it's still very early on. And
yes.
she probably didn't expect it to go to where it got to, right? Like, obviously, she didn't want anything to do with it early on, and then it kind of just kept dragging on. And then obviously, she kind of liked him to some extent, right? Because that's what it goes, right? After they kind of, she helps him
unpacking all the stuff until the morning, and then next morning he was supposed to get on a plane to fly somewhere, and then she went to the airport
because he's from Norway or whatever.
Yeah, but it's very funny because now that I think back, these kind of tropes are like turned on their heads for like a romantic comedy. When you meet, you know, you do something together, you fall in love. One person goes to the airport, one person tries to rush behind them and try to keep them to stay.
Well, they do that scene. They do that scene, maybe not as romantically as she like runs back to the airport and is like, "I want to have sex with you."
Yeah.
And then that takes him off. He's like, "All right, I'll stay an extra night," or whatever he wanted. And then they like make love, and then he like is falling in love with her instantly, and she's like, "No, like I'm not there." Like it's like one day essentially to be together, and she's like a little bit accepted, but not to the point where he's fallen for her hard. And then the next day he like gets up to go to the news agents, and then he sees in the newspaper that the plane crashed, and that her like asking him to say saved him. And then I'm like, oh my God, that's quite a twist. I'm like, oh my gosh, I was like, she saved him by killing her father. So I was like, oh my God, that's like feels very Shakespearean. Kind of the tragedy of this love story, essentially, of like, if she didn't kill his father, I don't know if he would have still gone on the plane, but you know, it wouldn't have been in that situation where she went to get him and seen him and then like made him stay and didn't get on that plane. So
in a way, like this story has some sort of like supernatural kind of forces as well.
I don't know if it's supernatural or just like convenient. It's fate, more fate than supernatural.
And the stranger that they both spoke to at the pivotal moments as well. You know, like she spoke to him in the subway when she's thinking about turning herself in, and the other guy spoke to the same guy when he found out that she's the murderer of his father.
Because after the airplane bit, he's like confessing his love and she's like, don't say it. And then she tells him, we don't hear it, but you can see she tells him.
Yes.
And it's like, then he goes back to the bar and drinking like he doesn't know. And then he tells the guy, he's like, fallen in love with the woman that killed my father or whatever. And he's like, why does it matter?
Yeah.
Does anyone else know?
Just go get married, have a bunch of kids or something.
Yeah, it's like, does anyone else know? He's like, no. It's like, well, I'm not going to tell anyone. And then it's just like, oh God, here we go. I did like that though. I did like that aspect that he talked to the same dude she did about confessing to this dude killing or the horrible situation. But
I want to get your take on this as well, because every images in Villeneuve's stories has a few extra meanings, right? So we have already discussed about the talking fish, about the images of fish or water throughout the movie. What do you think this stranger represent?
I don't know, like more that like maybe accepting the reality of the situation, maybe, because it's just like it is such a weird situation, right? Like how do you compute or even comprehend like killing someone and like living your life normally, right? And then even another level of like I fell in love with someone that killed my father, and it's like how do you live with it? And he's very simple, is like, you know, if you really love it, doesn't matter, like just move on. Like, does anyone else know? Does anyone else care? Like it's so conflicting for both of them, but it's like this is like the bigger turning point of like, will he let it be? Does he want this relationship to go on, or does like getting revenge for his father mean more than his current love for this woman he met 2 days ago?
And at the end of the day, you know, love conquers all, apparently. And
because even before, I was going to say, before he like goes back, he's in the bar stall and he was ready to flush his father down the toilet, saying this is just as good as anything. Kind of like I feel like he already kind of knows in his mind, he's like, I can't kill this woman. Like he's like, I'm just going to flush him and like go. Even though him going back to their room or her room and then like dumping his ashes all over her just like another way of being like, oh, I don't know what to do. You can deal with him.
And I like the fact that she would vacuum him a bit
Yeah, vacuum
later.
him up. I'm like, that's kind enough.
Yes,
Collecting most of him up, right?
Yeah. And I read somewhere that the stranger is in a way that is a representation of faith and fate and Christianity in a way. It's very weird. I'm not sure
about Christianity.
Yeah, so
Maybe
basically,
fate.
yeah, so maybe like when they are at a low point and they need someone to to give them advice, and this stranger just appears out of nowhere, and gives them the advice that they shouldn't worry too much about the sins. This is just what I read. It might be completely wrong, but I find it quite interesting because I think we quickly touched on this before, but like there's some sort of supernatural or a bit of fate involved. Like they went to the funeral parlor at the same time. Then they were talking about the same person. You know what I mean? So and they ended up falling in love. It has some sort of Shakespeare in it. Like it's already written.
Yeah.
In a way, right?
Yeah,
so,
it's like a terrible fate. Because that's like, I wouldn't say so much religion, because he isn't giving them kind of like clarity, or not, or even like, he's not forgiving them. He's not like, for like Catholic, in the way the Catholics deal with it, like they forgive you for your sins to like move on with your life. But it's for them, it's more coming to terms with it and whether or not they're willing to for the other person or wherever they want to go in life, more than like, because he's not like comes down like as like would if you describe him as like an angel to be like, oh, your love means more than your father's life. Then maybe you didn't know that well. Maybe this means more in the long run or whatever. Like this could be mean more good. Her saving your life is like a big message. It wasn't like that. The guy's just like, mate, does anyone really care? And he like, it is what it is. If you love her enough, that's all that matters kind of thing. And he takes the drink. He's like, takes the drink and he walks off. He's like, I fucking keep running in these bastards. He probably knows more murders than anybody. He's probably runs into every day. He's like, stop confessing to me, all right? I just want to live my life. Just trying to get on the train. Just trying to have a drink at a bar.
That's it. Yeah, no, I just find it interesting that people, try to interpret the representation of this stranger.
I think that's like another thing. If we ever get to other directors as well, people might read into things too much sometimes as well. Like maybe it doesn't need to be as deep, but that's always. Like we say, these are like for people to take in and have their own views. Like everyone's going to see something different to someone else, right? Or even how they want something to go. So that's always hard as well. Like going into something, reading it from your perspective rather than someone else. Like I was brought up a Catholic, but I'm not looking for like a Catholic sign or like. Not that I mean it isn't there, but for me that's not what I'm looking for or expecting kind of thing. I don't know how you viewed the stranger personally, but
first I viewed I view him as a very weird convenience because he appears there and then he basically tells the character out loud what they really really want to do deep down, and
very much a plot device, right?
Yeah. But then when I read the interpretation online, I was like, okay, this is quite interesting.
Yeah, he dumps her on her, and then she like vacuums him up, and then like they're like, oh, we got to give him a better send off than this, right? Like I think that's when like the final moment. He's just like, I can help you send him off or whatever. Because then I think it jumps like 3 months later when they get onto the boat and actually give him like a proper send off. Because it kind of like it leaves it a bit ominous to be like, oh, did he actually like leave to do it himself, or did she's still there? Did they do it together? So it does give that kind of ending of like, okay, they're going to try to wherever this relationship's going to go, it's going to go. And I'm like, oh, she's still got a lot of other shit to deal with her life apart from this murder.
Yeah.
But because that's even weird, like even just talking about the idea of her like keep going along with him rather than leaving as soon as you meet, like she should have just left straight off when he met him, just been like, no, I just wanted to kind of give my well wishes or whatever and leave. But like you said, sometimes things happen for the plot, right?
Yeah.
Because then it even like goes back to the fish and he's like, oh, thanks for listening. And then he's just like, bloop, off you go and back
and
to it.
before he got chopped up, he's like, I would tell you the secret of life, the meaning of life. And then, that's it.
But that's what I mean. Like, there was nothing else to fish at it at the end. That's what I was thinking. I wonder how it's going to end with like the whole fish thing. It's like, he was kind of more of the narrator, but that's what I mean. Depends how you want to look into it. But no, I enjoyed this more than what I thought I was going to.
Yeah.
I didn't know anything going in. I didn't really read up or look into any of the synopsis.
Yeah.
It was only the name when I saw Maelstrom. I'm like, oh, I wonder what Maelstrom means.
Yeah.
And I feel like it was a perfect title for this film.
Yeah.
It like really encapsulates what it's trying to do.
No, I think so as well. Like, I didn't know what to expect before I came into this movie, and I think that should be the approach of the viewers, because I think nowadays with the social media, before a movie gets out, people get videos leaked and story and in the interpretations. I think like being surprised is one of the joys of being an audience at the movies, right? And after this movie, it took Denis Villeneuve 9 years
for another full-length film.
For another feature.
There's some shorter films in there, but whether we touch on those at some point.
The shorts are quite interesting as well. So
yeah, I was going to watch them. I forgot to. I was like, I should watch them, but I didn't get to them.
I managed to watch one, Next Floor. Which
I
think,
saw that one.
Which I think you really enjoy. Okay, so 9 years later, he made the 2009 Polytechnique, another dark movie.
Yeah, but you kind of knew going in with this one, because this one, kind of when you look at it, you're like, okay. I was dreading watching this the most out of the films we were going to watch, because I was like, this is going to be tough to watch.
Yes,
because I already knew what was going to kind of go down. And I'm like, whether or not it's a good movie or not, but it's just a tough thing to deal with.
Very hard topic to discuss for sure,
and even to like reenact a lot of the stuff that happens in this film, which is like brutal.
Yeah, and I want to discuss some of the artistic choices that Denis Villeneuve made for the movie. But do you want to discuss like the actual events that inspire the movie?
So a misogynist shoots up his university because he hates women. Well, that's what misogynist means, but yeah. And then it focuses on him and then two other students at the school, that like how they deal with it and kind of their lives and stuff, which I thought it was a good look, that it has like a man and a woman. I don't know if he chose that deliberately to see how they both took what happened and how both of their lives changed and how it affected them. So, because I thought that was like, yet again, different perspectives of this film, right? We have the shooter, the engineer,
Valerie,
Valerie, she's
the engineering student,
and then Jeff as well, who I think also an engineering student. It was a hard film. It was still, I was right, it was hard to watch, but tough film.
And I hated the fact that the streaming platform that I was using doesn't allow me to speed up the movie.
So I had to sit through it.
I had to sit through it
no speeding up.
at a normal speed. So when I read about the tragic event, it was Canada's most deadliest shooting for a long time before the 2020 shooting. It was another one. Yeah. And
well, at least it was like 30 years or whatever. What was it? When was this? 1989?
1989.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So not like the next week.
Well, luckily. Well, this event changed a lot of things, in terms of the protocols on how police respond to the mass shooting, also on the security and the gun control in Canada, and the date that it happened, and December 6th, is now a national day of remembrance in Canada, so that people get reminded of this.
It's a
event.
good thing to remind people of, right?
But the thing here is like it's not just that, but like the date was appropriated by a movement of women. They talk about how this event is a representation of violence against women.
Well, it was literally
it was that.
It was that. There was literal violence against women.
But there was also another side of the argument that they said that the feminist movement trying to appropriate this event for their cause, because in the actual event, 14 women were murdered. Another 10 women were injured, and another 4 men were also injured. But they didn't mention that in the movie. But there was this whole debate going on after the event, things like that. Yeah,
it shows some of it, because I think we see 1 or 2 men shot in it, but were actually like shot and dead. But that's not, from a movie point of view, like, I don't know how accurate or to the point. Like, if it misses anything, I didn't want to delve too much into it. But like, I think like the main points of like what the shooter was trying to do was shown very well. And even like, because he has those, he wrote a lot of notes, so it was very brutal. Of like, he obviously explained what he wanted to do, so it wasn't just like, he wasn't trying to hide what he was trying to accomplish, right?
Yes.
And whether it's appropriated, but that's the thing as well. Like, anyone can use anything for anything, right? Like, it's a thing that's going to happen, but like trying to understand what happened and kind of moving forward in that way, I think is a better way to do it. Whatever group uses it in whatever way, but like, it doesn't take away from what his actions were and what his goals were. And I think that's like, I don't think it's unreasonable for feminists to use this as something to like use as an example.
Yeah.
Because it is literally the like if you would think of any way to describe violence against women, this is like the pinnacle.
Yeah.
Right. This is the end it gets to. Right.
Yeah, absolutely. And I found it quite interesting as well. Like after the events happened, the Canadian government, they didn't want to release the content of the 3 letters, and probably because they knew exactly what they meant
the response
for.
would be. Yeah.
And then a few years later, the content got leaked online.
Which is probably for the best, because it's like we should never glorify the people that do it, but you should understand why they did it, right? And early in the film, it kind of goes through his headspace. He was obviously very depressed and in a horrible space. And what, from his point of view, he thought it was women's fault for taking all these chances away, even though it was kind of on him. Because it even shows that he was trying to join, like, I don't know, was it cadets or something? But it was like an army.
Yes, he did.
And that's where he kind of got his training from. And that they even said he was not mentally well enough because they said he's antisocial. And I'm like, that's like a point to be like, not that they're going to try help him, but they should have been like, you need to get some help or whatever. But that was like, we're going into like the 80s. Like, I doubt they cared that much about mental health that much. Like even now it's a little bit better, but even then it's like, it's still a big issue. But that's like, I do like that it goes into that. And it doesn't like, change what he does, because that's the thing. You can struggle and have these issues, but you don't need to take them out on other people.
Yeah,
that's like the extreme, right?
Absolutely.
It doesn't, like, just because someone's going through something doesn't give you the right to harm and hurt other people.
Yeah.
And that's what's like tough. It's like, oh, I could see someone struggling to a situation like that, but to like get to the point where it's like they're blaming women because they're taking, it's like a weird way he like explains it, because he's like, oh, they're manipulating things to get things they shouldn't want, and they get more like rights and they get more like eyes on it, because it's like, oh, it's the women, they get all the spotlight for the thing that maybe a men could have done. And it's like, you can clearly see he's like spiraling, because he's just taking these things to use as a reason to murder women.
Yeah. And I think like this story's got a lot of intriguing angles as well, because they did a bit of research about his background. His father was a bit of a misogynist, and he left. So the father left the family when he was young, and then he got the. So it's very weird. Like his father left him, so he had that kind of void. But then for some reason he relates to whatever his father was doing, because the father was very abusive to his mom, and then he left. So in a way, he was trying to cope with the detachment by clinging onto his father's ideals. Yeah, it's very weird and strange.
Because when they delve into this stuff, they kind of usually it happens when it's young, and that kind of like sits with them, and that's what affects them in the long run. But yeah, that's tough when it's like, that's what I mean. It happens so early. It's like whether it was too late or not, but. Yeah, it's tough to be like dealing with these people that are clearly like need help, but never were going to get it.
Yeah, so after the events, a lot of things change about the policies, about the gun control and things like that. And the actress that played Valerie in the movie, she's also one of the main producers, and she had the idea of making the movie about this event for a long time.
Okay.
And she was the one who secured Denis Villeneuve as the director for the movie.
Well, there you go.
So when he came on board, and they had a quick discussion, and one of the first questions that they had is this too early to make this movie?
Yeah, well, was it 20 years at that point, or from when it released?
So 10 years after the event, but yeah, so and the answer was no, it's not too early to make this movie. They had a few artistic choices. The first one is the movie was black and white. So what do you think about this artistic choice?
I think that was interesting, because that's what I was thinking as I was watching it. I'm like, what does black and white do to it? I think it kind of takes away some of the brutality, which is probably a bit important, like with a lot of the blood and stuff that's seen through the film. But because especially when it's like recapturing or trying to relive a moment, and that's why as well, it's like it is in the past. I think that's what it tries to gather with as well. That's why it's in black and white as well. But I know that's what I kind of got to. What about yourself, Darren? What did you think?
No, I definitely think black and white was a very intentional choice, because obviously you don't want to enhance or glorify the violence inside the movie. And I think that movie is a representation of a memory as well. So black and white makes sense. And throughout the movie, you didn't see any other colors.
Well, that's what I was going to say. Was the end scene in color? I can't remember. I don't think so. I think it was all black and white, wasn't it? Like the final scene with her. I can't remember now.
It was in a very pale color palette, I believe. But yes, I think it was a very good choice. And another artistic choice that I want to discuss is the movie was not shot at the actual college where the event happened.
Yeah, that would have been brutal. I
Even
think.
though he had the permission to do
he
it.
did? Oh,
Yeah.
okay. I think that was probably the right choice. I don't know.
Yeah.
Whether you want to believe in like, I don't know, like other stuff, I think it is like, I don't know, I think it'd almost be a bit rough to refilm, kind of reenact what happened there and film it all kind of. It feels a bit sour, kind of, almost. It would be more on a sour note on the film where it's already dealing with a tough subject.
Yeah.
That's it. I think I wouldn't have, whether I
Yeah.
ever but I feel like I almost would have made the same choice. I wouldn't have wanted to refilm it there, I would think.
And the reasons that Denis gave was like he wanted to be respectful to the victims,
yeah.
because technically some of the survivors had to go back to the school. Obviously, you don't want to be like, you know what, I'm going to make a movie about the shooting that happened.
Yeah,
here.
and if they even got the courage to like watch the film or whatever, right? And like the last thing you probably want to see is like see the old place again. But
Yeah.
it still would have been tough. But yeah, I think that's fair.
Yeah, and the last artistic choice I want to discuss is he left out the name of the murderer out of the movie, out of the end credits, out of any of the other characters' mouths. Even though they found out the identity of the killer,
obviously he's out there.
So what do you think about this choice?
Yet again, more respect for like the victims and stuff. And like we said, these people shouldn't be glorified, right? He isn't a movie star. This is kind of like a horror story about like what kind of happens, and like seeing what happens and like these kind of people, and it's like something like this shouldn't happen again, or at least do their best, try not to make it happen. It's not there for him to like glorify his actions at all. And I felt, I'm sure I've already said that, but like I felt like I did a good job of not like glorifying what he did, right?
And what do you think about Denis' choice to do non-linear storytelling in this? Because this actually movie would work if you just follow the events from start to finish. It would still work. But in this case, he retold the stories through the perspective of Valerie and John. And Jeff.
Yeah.
I
think it was Jeff.
What do you think about this choice?
I thought it was a very good choice because it's very interesting because even like we see in Maelstrom, he uses it as well, where it's kind of like a turning point and then it switches back to the other character of like, because I think we go from her point and then we go to Jeff and then when everything that happens with Jeff and then Jeff's story kind of like ends and then it jumps back to her character again because we don't know at this point like whether or not you read the details before or understand how all the story went, like jumps back to her and she's like, oh shit, she's still alive, and then like jumps into her story. So I found it very interesting and it told very well because we kind of like understand what she was trying to do, and even when she goes to the university first and she's getting ready to do an interview because she wants an internship, and then she's already facing misogyny straight out of the bat. The guy's like, oh, you're a woman, you're going to have kids. That's why you shouldn't do a higher end of engineering because you're going to have to want kids and that's going to affect your job. And it's like, oh, okay, bro. Even though she ends up getting it and she tells her friend and she's like, oh, I don't really feel good about working for this guy because he obviously, it shouldn't matter if she wants kids or not, if that's going to affect her performance or whatever. But so it even kind of sets up like, it already contradicts what this kid thinks. He thinks women get a head up in life because they're feminists and they get what they want, but it's not that way at all. And then like after that kind of happened, then it jumps to like Jeff's perspective because he knows them and he's just like, oh shit, like he didn't in the room and when they split up and he felt guilty about it because he's like, oh, he knew what was going to happen, like it was, but it's like, what can you do? Like if he stayed or not, he probably would have got shot as well, right?
Yeah.
And that's like a tough moment because then it goes to his perspective of like when it's all going down, he's running around, tried to get help, and the security guard's like, "What is this happening?" He's like, "It's happening," and even that and then not everyone knowing because that's what's the scariest bit when they're following along with him, and like all the other students don't know yet, and then when he comes in and starts shooting, they all get up and just run for their lives and stuff. So it's so brutal. And then like when it gets to like his end, when he's like tries to save that girl, he goes back into the room and he sees her and he's like, oh shit, they are. He feels that he's like, oh shit, they just shoot them all. And then it deals with him like when it's over, and then he goes to visit his mother, and he's like, she's like, are you all right? Are you doing? He's like, yeah, and he's putting on a brave face, and then obviously later takes his own life. Yeah, and that's brutally like, oh fuck, like it kind of reminds me of like, is it PSD? Like when you go to war, or
the
like,
PTSD, yeah,
yeah, and it's kind of like he can't live with knowing. Not but his own actions, but just living with like seeing war. It's like not war, but like seeing death at this scale, and he just couldn't live with it, which is brutal. It's
Yeah.
like, and then like it cuts back to her, and then like jumps back to her and her kind of like what she was trying to do to survive as well. And I thought it was done very well. Like,
Yeah.
it really kind of captivates you in a way where it's hard to like want to pay attention, right?
Yeah.
With dealing with all these, terrible things.
And it deals with a lot of difficult topics as well, because out of the actual event, 2 other students did commit suicide
Yeah.
because of the guilt and the trauma from the event. And I think, again, like the story of this movie is all about the victims and the survivors and what they have to go through. And I think it's a very powerful perspective to choose, because like I mentioned before, with this movie, if you just follow the shooter's perspective, then you technically turn him into the main character of the movie. Which is not, which is what you don't want, and you don't want to glorify this. And I was very surprised to learn about Jeff's fate in the movie, and it gave me a very different perspective about the shooting, because usually when you hear about a mass shooting, it's all about like why did this killer do it? We always try to find out about the killer. But then, we kind of left behind the survivors and the victims. Which is a very, very powerful artistic choice. And I think, like when you watch a movie and it changes your perspective, and you have to give the movies, the filmmaker, some credit about that as well.
Because, like you're saying, they only kind of put the shooter in the film enough to kind of understand his motivations and leave it at that kind of thing, right?
Yes.
They don't like do too much. It's just kind of what he was thinking, getting ready to do it, and then just the action. And then, but even that we experienced through the 2 different characters rather than him. So I think you're correct there. I think that's pretty well put. Like seeing, especially like that's the thing, right? Survivors. He had a bit of survivor's guilt, because when we go back to her point, and she's like, they're like wheeling her out at the end. He's like, oh, it's my fault. I should have stayed. And she's like, it's not your like. Literally, what could have he done? Like, even if he tried to tackle him or fight him, like he has no guarantee that he would have survived or got through it. Like, it's always like the hard thing to be like, what's the right thing to do? And like, he did do the right thing to like run away and get help. That's what I thought was crazy. Like, we go to his. Like, I don't know if any of the other people in that room tried to run to get help, but like, it was from his point of view of him. It seemed like he was the only one they tried to get out. And I feel like the other people there, even like there was a couple of teachers in there, I feel like they could have done something, but I don't know. I don't want to delve into like what more could have been done.
No, I mean, like, and now that I know the story of the event, I found out that the authorities and the police forces were really unorganized and unresponsive during the actual event. And I think maybe Denny was trying to capture that as well. Like the security guy.
It did feel that,
yeah. So it was
like it went on for too long.
It did happen in real life as well. So like the police waited outside for a long time. During that time, he
was shooting people.
Yeah, he was shooting people. And turns out one of the victims, a lady, she was 22 years old, and she was the daughter of the director of the police.
Oh, wow.
So when he came to the scene to do the press, and then she found out that his daughter was inside, and she was murdered.
Yeah.
So like this event changed a lot of things and affected a lot of people more than I realized. And I want to discuss the cinematography of some of the some of the scenes and shots as well, like the shots where he shot the teacher in the room, and then he ended his own life. Yeah. And then, you saw the blood merging and things like that. So people call it like the beauty shot. But what do you think is the meaning behind this shot?
That's what I remember. I was like, what's he trying to get across here with them both kind of being dead and shot and their blood meeting? Like, that they met the same end. Like, it didn't really, like, all of his actions didn't really accumulate too much. Like, he didn't get across any of what he was trying to shoot these women for. Like, death is death. Like, it was a hard thing to take in, because he's obviously not trying to, like, glorify him even shooting himself. It's like, what was the point of all this? Like, they're both dead. Nothing was solved. Like, it's kind of sad. Like, it is a brutal, because that's what I was like, oh, this is brutal. Like, it does leave, like, something with you watching that scene. I was like, so tough. Like, well, that's what I would kind of take from it. It's hard. It's a hard scene to kind of like try to take something from, right? Yeah. But I do think there's something there to kind of like.
And like throughout that sequence, the camera was always on a high angle, shooting down, and he was shooting people through
straight
the
through
desk.
the tables.
Yep. So in my perspective, it feels like right now we're watching a scene from high above, and it gives us a bit of a helplessness kind of sense. Because we're so far away.
Do
we
the
cannot
whole
do
thing, yeah. Because no one could do anything because it's just like he's just looking for the people he wanted to shoot, right? Like that's what's so brutal. He's just like, oh, that looks like a woman. I'll probably shoot her, right? That's kind of like what he was doing.
Yeah.
So it's like it's tough. Like there was a lot of scenes like that where you felt like, what could you do? Like try to run, try to get out because there's that room. Was it when they're in the cafeteria and they shoots out the glass and they're trying to run out that way? So it's like it's very brutal.
Yeah, and I want to discuss the final message of the movie as well. So Valerie, one of the survivors, she ended up getting the job. She got a family and she was pregnant.
Well, it shows that she find out she's pregnant.
And then she wrote a letter to the mother of the murderer. And, you know, in the end, the message that Denis want to provide to the audience is at the end, love and forgiveness is always the better choice.
Yeah, but even for her to be like thinking kind of like how it's affected her, like he's done with it. For him, it's done. For her, though, she's still got to live with it every day. So that's the thing. Like you're saying, showing the survivor's kind of guilt of like she has to keep reliving it, having the nightmares, living with because that's like when she was writing it. I'm like, oh, like it's tough because she's like she's living her dream essentially, right? She's living with her partner. They're just about to have a kid. She's like talking to her father about, you know, and it's just like, oh, but like it's still hard. Like
her life will not be the same anymore.
Yeah.
Like whatever normal event is happening,
it's always going to live with her, and that's what, you know, I can see why maybe like they wanted to do the film. Like it's kind of like another cathartic way to like get it off your chest a bit. But yeah, I thought it was a very touchy ending. Yeah, because even when I saw it when she got pregnant, I'm like, they're not going to fire her. I hope like, that would be a horrible kind of thing to do.
Yeah.
But no, it does leave on a bit more of a cheerful note, even though it's like such a horrible thing that happened, right?
Yeah. And from this movie, now I think Denis Villeneuve has established himself as a director who is not afraid to touch on very sensitive topics, very controversial topics, very dramatic events and stories. And I think you, like in the other episodes where we discuss the other movies, you will see a lot of the imageries that he used in his early movies, in his later movies.
Because you can see a lot of his shots. Like I think of like all of his bigger movies, there's always lots of like setting the tone of the movie through shots of where it just of maybe the environment or the scene or like or the, you know, the location and stuff. He does that a lot to like set the mood. And I could see that a lot in Polytechnique a lot where it was like taking just maybe a shot of the school or just a shot of like the snow in the trees, just like small shots, just transcending into like or transitioning into other scenes. Yeah. Maybe not so. Well, there's probably a few in Maelström as well, but that's what I kind of like when I think of like. I've already talked about Blade Runner a shit ton, but that's what like him setting the scene. Even in Dune, he does it quite well. It's like setting a scene without, you know, like someone going like, "Oh, this is this is Harkonnen and deserts and there's big sandworms and stuff." Like it shows you with the camera, which is what he does in these films as well. Even though, like you say, that final scene with the shooter and stuff. So does a great job of like presenting something without words or dialogue.
Which I find very interesting because when you are a filmmaker, it's a visual storytelling. I don't understand why more and more filmmakers nowadays, they try to tell us the story through dialogues and expositions instead of just showing us. And I think that's why at the moment Denis is one of the most sought after directors.
Because it's definitely like that can be on a lot of things like with writing or even the story, but because that's like if you've ever watched the original Dune movie by
David Lynch.
And it's just like he does a lot of dialogue stuff because there's a lot of story and trying to get it all out in a film's tough. So it's like every kind of like thing, it's just like, what do I leave out? What do I leave in? And that's what kind of like, having monologues and stuff. So it's like, oh, here it all is kind of thing.
Yeah.
And trying like, he got lucky with the Dune series where he had more time to be like, okay, we're going to give you time to set up the world a bit and actually you can experience it a bit and not just like, here it is. I hope you got it and I hope you remember it because there's a lot of, even though Maelström probably deals with more complex ideas, but like just getting the idea of where the film's dealing with and what's going on moving forward. And like that's like the fish kind of thing with the fish at the start of Maelström. It kind of like gives you an idea what you're into. It's like, what the f***'s going on? And then you jump into the abortion. You're like, oh, okay. Maybe the fish wasn't a bad start. But like he has a great way of setting things up and showing for what you're kind of getting into moving forward.
Yeah.
And I'm sure, like we said, we got a couple more movies to go, even though we've talked about a few of his films before. But
this will be a very, very interesting series. And the movie Polytechnique dominated the Genie Award, so it's got 11 nominations, won 9 out of 11. It's got Best Picture, Best Director, Best Actress, Best Supporting Actor, Best Cinematography, Best Editing, Sound Editing, and Polytechnique was shot by Pierre Gil, so he's the director of cinematography. He later worked with Denis Villeneuve as a second unit director for Blade Runner.
Well, there you go.
Yeah, so I mean, so like it seems like it's very hard for a director to come across people that he really likes.
Yeah,
and even Denis admitted that director of photography and cinematography are one of the most important people. Director, he has visions, but he cannot achieve that vision without the person that can tell the story through the cameras.
Even another series we talked about, like with Wes Anderson, he likes using a lot of the same actors because obviously he trusts them to kind of get across what he wants from them, right? Because that's like, if you didn't like how someone performed, you're not going to use them again, are you?
Absolutely.
So it's the same kind of way. His is maybe a bit easier to see, but like definitely I think, I'm sure we're going to do a few other directors, but we'll probably see that there's like, there's a bit of a, either cooperative between actors and directors or even like behind the scenes.
Yeah. Anything else you want to add before we wrap up the episode?
No, I think that's a good ending. Maybe don't end on the shooting stuff, but it is what it is.
Yeah.
That is the end of the episode. Let us know what you think about the conversation in the comment section below and smash that like button.
Ring the bell and subscribe as well, and you better be back next time.
And we will see you in the next episode.